I watch a lot of media over my years, and I've a lot of things that I enjoy. Um, Sometimes, though, I come across something that I just have a harder time dealing with and grasping. And that can either be a good or a bad thing, depending on what form of media it is. If it's confusing and complex for good reasons, and because it's got a good story and it tells it very either out of order or indirectly, and allows the audience to pick up on the pieces and kind of formulate the plot themselves. I honestly think that's a good thing. However, there are parts where sometimes the confusion is less to do with, you know, the story intentionally being kind of vague and indirect, and it being kind of a situation where too much input or this project was pulled in too many directions, and can kind of make things not go in the way you want them to. Like, I understand that you kind of want to have a lot of creative vision and a lot of ideas and let people come in and do things and kind of influence a piece of property, because a lot of good ideas, a lot of people with good ideas can help a product be better. But sometimes you got too many cooks in the kitchen, and what you come out with is not necessarily what you came in to get, and oftentimes it can make the product into a worse position than what you would have done if you just had one united vision. Everybody kind of conformed to that vision. And I really can't think of a better example of that I know of than the Egyptian god Mech story of RahXephon. RahXephon is kind of a Ava-inspired product, considering when it came out and what immediately preceded it. Obviously, it's a mech show. Kind of borrows from Ava's idea of the mechs are alive, their own living creatures of some capacity, and have their own autonomy. However, they do kind of serve the wielders. In this case, a cast that very much resembles, the trio from Evangelion. Main character is basically Shinji. He's got a spunky tsundere younger girl. There's also the autistic chick who just kind of does whatever she wants and is very important to the plot. And of course, you also have your older Misato type who is doting after the underage man because she really wants to be with him. So it definitely took heavy inspiration from Evangelion, and I personally don't think RahXephon is as good as Ava for a multitude of reasons. Not at least being the story, but also I just feel like all of the characters created in the story, when I compare them to Evangelion, because that's obviously what the show at least is going for. It's a very, very obviously, if not, it's heavily inspired by Ava. Let's just say that. And just comparing to them, while I don't particularly like Shinji, I feel like the way the plot deals with that Shinji's progression, the progression of all the other characters in Evangelion, goes about in a better way that RahXephon does. So I feel like RahXephon on that front just kind of fails in comparison to the project that it certainly is taking cues from. Now, having said that, I still have a lot of fun with RahXephon. It is a very weird story, having Tokyo be encapsulated in a Jupiter ball that prevents space aliens from coming out and killing people or whatever is odd. Also, the aliens are just people with blue blood, and also have Egyptian mechs. It really just took the Christian themes that Evangelion kind of took in symbols just to tell its story, and kind of does the exact same thing with Egypt. I'm not sure all the things that it goes over in its plot necessarily correlate to ancient Egyptian teachings of how the godhood works in the Egyptian hierarchy and how all those things work. I don't know, but I'm going to guess that the cast working on it probably saw, the Christian and or the at least Abrahamic inspirations for RahXephon, and what if we, now hear me out, what if we did it with Egypt? Because Egypt's a cool place. Egypt's got a lot of cool iconography, a lot of gods, a lot of varied inspirations to take from. It's got a lot of influence. I can see why. But getting back to the topic at hand, RahXephon is weird. It does a lot of things weird. Characters are weird, kind of how things progress. But I think the weirdness is what kind of pulled me in, is really, really the story. Because the story is confusing, and I'm not sure if it's the intention of those who made it, or whether it's really kind of just an incident of how things kind of worked out. When it comes to the progression of the story and kind of figuring out like who all these main players are, why they're connected, why certain characters are the way they are, why do they act in the ways they do, where are their origins, why is the world in this position, what are these aliens, what is this threat. It goes about in a way where I left scratching my head at times, and I'm like, did I blink and just miss an important plot point, or am I just not understanding it? Am I stupid? It feels weird in that sense. And there certainly are very complex stories and narratives that if you don't pay attention to some of the things that happen, you are just not going to understand the story. For example, Ergo Proxy. If you just nod through 5 minutes Ergo Proxy, you are going to miss very vital information that is going to hurt you in the long run of the show. It's a show that you have to pay attention to at all times so you can bring everything in. I love Ergo Proxy for that. Having said that, with RahXephon, though, I don't get that same feeling in comparison to Ergo Proxy or other shows in that similar vein of more confusing narratives. It feels like, at least to me, RahXephon just kind of didn't know what it was doing. Like the tone shift and like the actions and the things that they go about through each episode feels kind of disjointed at times. Like it's not the way I would tell this story. But to kind of go over what the story is, our main character, normal Tokyo kid, family, lives with his mom, don't have a dad in the picture. Aliens attack or something, and has to get transported away from Tokyo. Wakes up in some very off-putting version of reality, meets this girl. They get sent back they go back with her to her group, and it turns out Tokyo's in a ball, and it's shaped like Jupiter. And our main character is the linguist for the RahXephon Mech, which is, kind of like the Ava Mech, but it's got a humanoid face, and it eventually sprouts wings, and, it's a living thing, but has, like, all this armor and plating and all these adjustments made to it. It just makes it kind of weird. And he goes throughout the story kind of proving who he is. If he's not working with the aliens, he's a person. And the whole story hinges upon the fact, who is the main character? Why is he here? Who is the side character of the girl who has the blue tattoo? What is her purpose? What has going on in Tokyo? Why is it the way it is? Why did any of this happen? Who are these aliens who are destroying the world we understand? And why is all that going on? And we go throughout, and things get revealed about, actually, our main character's mom is an alien. And all of his friends, were also aliens. And like everyone who mattered to him back home, aliens. And they're all prepping the world for an invasion. Some of the humans who were working to cause problems in the world sided with the aliens, or were aliens the whole time. And a lot of the main characters in the outside of Tokyo scape, on the human side, have been heavily influenced by the actions of the aliens. Also, there's homunculi, like a lot of them. Like an old man using homunculi to keep himself immortal, and homunculi children meant to be the inheritors to, do good things, or to be the vessel for what the story is going for. The reason why the RahXephon is the way it is because our main character is meant to be the one who would inherit Ra, who, with meeting with his muse, per se, will join together, and he will take place as Ra, and he will be able to create and edit the universe however he sees fit. And that happens, and it doesn't go very well. A lot of people he knows dies, a lot of people he loves gets killed, and it makes people very sad. He eventually kind of returns to the ether, kind of in a depressive state with the other girl, the autistic girl, who turns out is also kind of like the muse he's supposed to mix with. When they combine, they form the singularity entity, so to speak. But in, this kind of mirror world where he's trudging through, he kind of has an emotional breakdown and realizes, I don't want this. I want to go and be back with the girl I love, the MILF, who, fun fact, was his girlfriend before he went to the new place, because it turns out, time travel. He traveled to the future, or either he got suspended in animation, and time moved back, and then he got spat back out. Whatever the case may be, time travel. He stayed the same age and everybody grew up. Now everybody's like, what? Hey? Okay. But why? So, when it comes to all this, I'm sitting here like, but why would you do any of this way? Like, I understand your through line. You want to get from point A to point B. It just feels like you're trying to throw too many curveballs, and they ended up kind of throwing me off. But why? But how? But how? But okay, I guess we can work with that. So the show kind of feels disjointed in a way, in a manner that just isn't the way I particularly like to enjoy shows and properties. And I come away look from the show being like, I mean, I could have been a little bit better. I'm not sure how much better. Probably at least a decent better. And the narrative just makes it end up being confused. And while he does get his happy ending, gets with the young girl or the old lady who was his girlfriend. They go together. They have a family, have kids. Everything's peachy keen. Everything goes back to everybody being happy. The aliens don't destroy the world because he uses his powers to send them away and make sure that none of this ever happened in the first place. Kind of like a flipping a switch and reverting all of reality situation. I'm left here at the end thinking like, I didn't dislike it. I think there's enough cool ideas. I think it's well animated for the time period. I don't dislike the characters. They're pretty solid. It's just the story, man. It just kind of feels off. And I was kind of doing some research afterwards, be like, For Bones, which is a studio that has got a lot of high-flying properties, has become very relevant recently with their works. Maybe some of you may know Blood Blockades Battlefront, or My Hero Academia, or Bungo Stray Dogs. Great, by the way. I enjoy all those properties. But it feels like they've kind of upped their game, at least in terms of like telling a more competent and straightforward story. And I think maybe RahXephon, maybe some of their properties afterwards, kind of turn them away from telling this more disjointed, erratic, spread out style of storytelling. And I think what really kind of maybe divulged this is just how many people were working on RahXephon back in the day, because the cast and crew, at least when it comes to the directing, writing, producing part of the show, is a little bigger than I would have expected coming into it, and I think that kind of makes a lot of sense, right? Like there's one director, but there's 5 producers and 7 writers on the show. And while I'm not entirely sure about their roles within the show, I don't know the full scope of what they did, that is a lot of people to be being the creative part of the show and making decisions and putting in input. And I think what really probably happened to RahXephon after its release and or during its release and its production and all that, is they were all inspired by what Evangelion had done and all the gangbusters numbers it was doing and the influence it was having in the space, and we're like, hey, we can do something like this in our own style and make a profit off of this craze that's flowing over the world. And they did. Although it's not nearly the same praise. I think Evangelion is a quintessential anime for like most people who have at least a general understanding of animation, or at least what anime in general. But back to RahXephon's issues, like the show's got one director, 5 producers, and 7 writers. So that's a pretty big amount of people working on the same project. And I think what probably happened is so many people were putting their stuff in and pulling the show in directions. It kind of had this disjointed, confused way about going things. Everybody wanted to put their things in. And these people have done some serious stuff. You got veterans of mecha shows and Gundam working on this series. People who have done, like, real things. People who worked, the guy who wrote Lane in Hellsing. People who have really put in the work and done a lot of work with, really important anime and just products overall. Like, they worked on this. And I think they all had their ideas, put them in, and pulled the show in so many directions. You're kind of sitting here like, it just pulled it too many. I think everybody had their ideas in, and it just kind of strangled the narrative. Made it very hard for people to see it right up close, and kind of gave it a confusing ending and be like, I'm left with more questions than answers, and I don't feel satisfied about that. It makes me feel like I think this could have probably been done better if they simply had one unified narrative in one direction, and would have brought RahXephon better than being this weird Ava Macross mix of like, yes, he is a depressed teenager, but he also wants to love the old lady. Like, I don't know, it's this weird state where it's like it's an imitator, and it's trying to be unique, but I think it's brought with a lot of people who have done similar stuff, and they brought their ideas in, and it kind of makes it feel pretty generic all the way through to the ending, with the giant egg kind of symbolizing Rey, and like what she did at the end of Evangelion. It just feels like RahXephon wanted to be different. They brought in a bunch of people with experience. They all basically made the same, just Evangelion again. And we're like, well, we did it. It's more confusing. The story is harder to follow. The character's less likable. And now we're stuck with it. And RahXephon is not a bad show. I enjoy it. It's not my favorite anime. Not my favorite mech show. Not my favorite Ava style. I certainly think it could have been done better, and I certainly think Bones evolved and would go on to do much better work afterwards. I don't know how you can look at Studio Bones and just look at the things they made after this, Wolf's Rain, FMA, Eureka 7, like they made better mech shows after this. And I'm sitting here like, I think this show is a good stepping point for Bones to go in the right direction. I just feel like they learned a lot and kind of about how they want to do things. And this just was kind of like, you know, maybe not the best way to do something. I think it would be better for them to have one unified vision and going like, yeah, this is better. Having, just an idea in our heads about how we want to do things and executing it, I think worked out better for them. And I think, while Eureka 7 suffered, and its narrative suffered, and its enjoyment suffered, Bones was better off for that. And I think I can look on the bright side and say, hey, Eureka 7 maybe wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but its sacrifice was worth it to get us better shows.